This is my research presentation on the preparedness of students transitioning from Jesuit on-campus middle schools to high schools in the southwestern United States from a social and educational perspective. First, my research focuses on the educational transition of students from on-campus middle schools to Jesuit high schools, specifically in the southwestern United States. We are focusing on this transition from on-campus middle schools, which are similar to Jesuit nativity middle schools, to high schools, which serve low-income and underserved students with a rigorous academic experience that is rooted in Jesuit values. However, as these students transition to high school, questions do arise about how these students feel academically and socially prepared for this next step in their education. This matters to me because I am involved in the Red and White Ambassadors, which help plan Brophy's open house and various initiatives for incoming freshmen. Additionally, I gained insight into the various challenges that students face while transitioning from middle school to high school. I'm also a member of the Student Office of Equity and Inclusion Committee, and I led various workshops on equity and inclusion topics, such as microaggressions or toxic masculinity. These experiences have shaped my interest in supporting underserved students in Jesuit schools, academically and socially. For some additional key terms, first is educational hegemony, which is the dominance of cultural/academic practices in shaping school experiences. This is particularly prevalent in white-dominated high schools, where those cultural norms from white students are sometimes impressed upon students of color. Additionally, academic preparedness defines how ready students feel for high school academics in comparison to middle school academics. Lastly, social preparedness is how ready students are to adapt socially in high school, and this can be in various facets, including in small interactions, as well as extracurricular activities. Our first theme in my literature review is educational hegemony. Firstly, Goodman in 1988 defines educational hegemony as the dominance of white, middle-class norms in school settings, which shapes everything from curriculum to student behavior expectations. This does become a systemic issue when students from underserved communities, such as those in Jesuit on-campus middle schools, enter high schools that reflect these dominant norms. Haberlin et al. In 2020 extended this by showing that even academically prepared students struggle socially and emotionally when the new school environments don't mirror the inclusive and supportive culture they came from. Lastly, the nurturing focus of Jesuit nativity schools, which are very similar to Jesuit on-campus middle schools, which include small class sizes, holistic care, and representation, stand in sharp contrast to high schools, where students often feel unseen or undervalued. The transition then, it doesn't just become about academics. It's also about navigating a system that wasn't built with them in mind. That's where educational hegemony becomes not just a theory, but it also becomes a lived experience. Next, cultural and social challenges. Martinez found that students of color entering predominantly white high schools often report a deep sense of cultural isolation. Even if they're academically ready, they may struggle to stay engaged because they don't see their experiences reflected within their peers, within staff, or within the curriculum. Haberlin et al. Reinforces this by noting that social challenges, not just those that are academic, often become the biggest hurdle for students in on-campus middle schools. Language barriers also make these problems worse. Miranda et al. And Barriers to School Success for Latino Students both highlight how families, especially Latino ones, are often shut out in the school system due to limited English proficiency. These barriers reduce critical parental involvement, which plays a huge role in student success. However, both Miranda and Martinez agree, schools that offer bilingual resources and culturally responsive teaching can help students and families feel seen, supported, and included. Jesuit nativity schools and academic foundations. Jesuit nativity schools are built around cura personalis, which is care for the whole person, which shows up in small class sizes, individualized instruction, and holistic support. Fenzel and Monti found that over 70% of students in these schools outperform their peers in reading and math, proving that these models do work. Similar outcomes are found in schools like Nativity Miguel or Success for All, or otherwise known as SFA schools. Slavin and Madden show that these schools close racial achievement gaps significantly through tailored support systems. These programs share a common thread. They prioritize both academic growth and personal development, especially for underserved students. However, Haberlin et al. and also points out a major issue, that the support systems that drive these success often vanish when students transition into larger, more traditional high schools. That gap can make students feel lost or underprepared, not because they have a lack of ability, but because they've lost that personalized, mission-driven structure that they've relied on. Additionally, the role of family and community support emphasizes that when families are engaged, students tend to do better academically and socially. But many families, especially those from marginalized communities, face barriers like language, work schedules, and systemic exclusion. The 2018 study on Latino family involvement agrees. Building strong parent-teacher relationships requires schools to meet families where they are, and using culturally sensitive communication and outreach is necessary. Nativity schools are strong in this area. According to Fenzel and Monti, they don't just educate students, but they support entire families through close-knit networks and intentional community building. But when schools move on to high school, these networks often disappear. Schools don't always have the structures in place to continue that kind of engagement. This disconnect leaves students without the safety net they relied on, which makes the transition even harder. The gap that I found in the literature is that although research on Jesuit nativity schools does provide valuable insights into student outcomes, there is a notable gap when it comes to understanding how these students feel as they transition to Jesuit high schools, especially in the southwestern United States. This gap also concerns both academic and social preparedness. This leads to my research question. How do students from on-campus middle schools and Jesuit high schools perceive their preparedness both academically and socially when transitioning to high school? Now into my data collection process. My data collection process was through the following stages. First, I contacted various students from the Jesuit on-campus middle school that I was studying via email. Then students filled out a form which was regarding the time and date that they were available. After this, I had them fill out an informed consent form where they filled out their signature if they were over 18, or they collected their parent's signature as well if they were under 18. And then I conducted a 15 to 20 minute semi-structured interview. The reason why I ultimately used interviews is because I was able to gather in-depth and personal insights. I was able to focus on individual student experiences and also explore various challenges that were faced by students. And then I was also able to examine the various support systems that were already in place to help these students. Semi-structured interviews also allow flexibility, which included a consistent structure while also leaving room for students to express their individual stories. Ultimately, I contacted 17 students, with 6 responding to conduct an interview. Next, into my data analysis process. I used reflexive thematic analysis, which is supported by Braun and Clark, which is flexible and participant-centered. This form of analysis essentially involves a relatively simple thematic analysis with no extra work involved, besides analyzing the biases within the researcher and how they might affect the outcome and the results. First, I began with open coding in MaxQDA, as you can. Oh, great.
It happens.
Did it crash? You're still connected. Just
I think you just closed your presentation. There you go.
There we go. It does that sometimes. Yes. Okay, I'm just gonna continue. I then took these codes that were created via open coding and put them into various groups. For example, imposter syndrome and confidence was linked to personal growth and challenges, and those were put in a group alongside 3 other codes. Then these codes were grouped into 4 different major categories, and then they were thematically sorted. This allowed for a nuanced understanding of student transitions within the Jesuit model. My findings indicated that there were various areas of struggle and then areas in which students found support. The areas of struggle included academic rigor, social interaction, as well as personal confidence. And then these students ultimately found support through family and parental influence, extracurriculars, structured programs, and Jesuit formation, as well as values, and then also a growth mindset that was within students and their own self-motivation. This found the Jesuit on-campus middle school provides some support, but gaps in preparation are still reported. These are two different word clouds of words that frequently came up within interviews while removing some more common nouns. So obviously the most prevalent it was school, but also there were various different nouns such as advantage, kind, experience, and community, which emphasize the various words and the various important factors that students found to be most helpful during this transition. Then next to it is the word cloud of adjectives, which overall was able to synthesize how students feel about this transition. Students described it as good, students described it as a big transition, which is to be expected, as well as some describing it as relatively easy, while some describing it as more difficult. The first theme that I found within my findings is family influence and academic pressure. Family influence was found to have three main effects on students. It was number one, that it shapes academic motivation, number two, that students are pushed to achieve high academic success, and three, that they are guided in their social life. Students often describe family as a source of academic and emotional support. Some said that their parents help motivate them, provide encouragement during challenges. A quote from a student down here is that I told my parents that I don't know, I feel like I'm not making friends, I feel like I'm just by myself, I'm lonely. This shows that students feel comfortable relying on their parents as a means to help them adapt socially when they enter high school. Other students reported less involvement with their family due to work schedules or more limited time, such as having more homework or just more involvement in general. A few mentioned that parental expectations could create stress, and the experiences with family support also varied significantly between participants. Next, extracurricular involvement. Students frequently joined clubs and sports as a means to meet new people and feel included. A quote from a student says that a lot of the things I'm doing in high school now, like archery and robotics, stem from me just wanting to make friends. This shows that the involvement in extracurriculars is often driven by social needs and not just interest. These social needs can include building friendships and for students to find their place. Some students noted that these experiences helped them gain confidence, and that participation also gave students structure and something to look forward to in their day. Next, academic preparedness. Students felt underprepared for an increasing coursework difficulty. This is especially prevalent in math and science when students took math placement exams or various other exams that were administered by the school for placement. A quote from a student says that in middle school, I wouldn't put my effort in, but in high school, I had to actually put an effort and time into my work. So since math and science were also mentioned as difficult subjects, and students struggled with adjusting to independent learning and time management due to a lack of development of study skills in middle school. Some students also shared they spent extra time seeking help from teachers or various academic resources. Students found that high school did require additional exerted effort and time compared to their middle school, and it was generally a big jump up from middle school. Furthermore, there was also a social transition that students reported to be difficult and also somewhat isolating as they adjusted to a much larger student body. Although students did adapt through various ways. Firstly, as seen by the quote here, retreats were a means of social integration for students. Particularly, this quote refers to a freshman retreat that the school does employ, which says, "The retreat opened my mind up, talking to others and stuff like that." This showed that the student after the retreat felt more comfortable engaging with talking to other people, especially those who he did not interact with in middle school and those who were new to the school. Students were able to overcome these social transitions by having strong teacher relationships and relationships to rely on. Additionally, many students cited various Jesuit values, such as men for others and the grad at grads, as a means of advancing their maturity in high school. Lastly, growth mindset and self-motivation. Through all of these challenges, students do eventually develop resilience and, particularly within academics, more study strategies. Both of these things are crucial to long-term success in Jesuit high schools. It's also noted that some students did initially struggle, but they learned to take ownership of their own learning through their time at high school. Additionally, mentorship, such as that by parents, teachers, and other stakeholders in their communities, as well as peer guidance, plays a large role in this development. Lastly, in terms of our discussion, many students did feel unprepared in terms of math and science, and many students also found that there was more independence required of them when they entered high school. This also aligns with the findings of Fenzel and Monteith, which found that high school does demand more independence from students and at a much higher level than the guidance they might have experienced from their Jesuit nativity school or a school that is generally more focused on their personal growth and their academic growth at a ratio that is much lower. This shows that schools should also nativity schools should strengthen coursework and also offer summer prep and teach study skills earlier so that students do not have to develop them in the middle of their high school career. Additionally, my study found that that students felt isolated adjusting to a larger school. This aligns with Martinez, is that representation of students does impact their belonging. Students found that students in the study found that if they didn't feel like their culture was being represented, then they didn't feel like that they belonged in the community and they felt a sense of isolation. Additionally, as mentioned in the previous slide, retreats and various forms of mentorship do help students integrate into the community. Family support gaps also found that some students do have parental support, but others lacked guidance. This is consistent with Miranda et al. That found that barriers like language and work schedules limit involvement. This means that students experience varying levels of parental support. Some might experience much less parental support because their parents are busy with their work schedules, attempting to sustain their family, while others are able to have that parental support. Additionally, we found that extracurriculars do help integration, which also aligns with the study by Martinez that found that students who are represented and feel like that they have a home at their school are able to integrate faster and are able to feel that they belong. My study also had various limitations and recommendations. Firstly, some limitations include that I had a small sample size, so my findings might not represent all of the transitions. I also only focused on one school, which means that the results might not apply to other Jesuit schools. Additionally, my short-term focus of students lacks long-term academic and social outcomes, and there are also missing perspectives. This does not include input from teachers, administrators, or parents, as it tries to focus mainly on student experiences. My recommendations for future studies include to expand the sample size, so to study multiple Jesuit middle schools as well as their transition to high schools to compare the experiences between them. I'd also recommend a longitudinal study to track students over several years, such as at the start of when that transition occurs, all the way till the end of their high school career, to assess academic and social outcomes and how those might be related to Jesuit on-campus middle schools. Additionally, including diverse perspectives, such as those from educators and administrators for families, would allow for a broader understanding, although this should be done ensuring that there is not a sacrifice of the student perspective that is so necessary. Additionally, there could be a study done on extracurricular impact, investigating how club participation might influence students' belonging and retention within the school. In conclusion, I found that successful transitions require academic, social, and emotional support, and not just coursework preparation. Jesuit middle schools do provide a strong foundation for students, but students did still face academic and social challenges in high school. Strengthening academic prep, mentorship, and extracurricular engagement can ease these transitions for students. Addressing equity gaps in family support and also resources could ensure that all students succeed. Future research should examine long-term outcomes and transitions across Jesuit schools, and better transition support would help students thrive more academically and socially. Thank you.
You have the old QR code for your bibliography. I love